Imagine you're building a $50 million research helicopter, and the manufacturer shipping the specialized glass for the cockpit gets delayed by like 3 weeks.
Oh, man, that is a total nightmare.
Right. But you don't just delay the window installation. You delay the electronics team who, they need a sealed cockpit to actually calibrate the environmental sensors.
Which then pushes back your final testing.
Exactly. That delays the final safety inspection, which triggers penalties in your client contract, and suddenly your quarterly revenue forecast is completely wrecked.
All from one delayed shipment of glass.
Yeah, just one shipment. So today we are looking at how SAP Project System, or SAP PS, prevents that kind of single delayed shipment from just crashing an entire timeline. Welcome to this deep dive.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to get into this one.
Yeah, we are taking the source documentation for SAP PS and basically dissecting how it manages this extreme scale of complexity. I mean, we're talking about everything from organizing international trade fairs to building massive manufacturing plants from the ground up.
The scale is honestly what makes this documentation so compelling to me. When a company is operating at the level of, say, building a whole new factory, your margin for error is essentially zero.
Right. Totally.
And trying to track the physical resources and the financial realities in two totally different systems, that is just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So SAP PS forces those two worlds to operate simultaneously within this highly rigid ecosystem. But before we get into the mechanics of how it does that, we really have to look at how SAP defines a project in the first place.
Because it's not just a casual term for them, right?
Not at all. The system does not let you just throw the word project around casually.
Right. I mean, if you're already familiar with standard enterprise resource planning, routine operations are just handled by standard modules.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need a specialized project system to manufacture 100 identical sedans every single day.
Exactly. That's just routine production.
Yeah. According to the source material, a project in SAP PS is defined by very specific parameters. It has to be complex, unique, and involve a high degree of risk.
Yeah, and it must have a strictly limited duration. It needs a definitive end date.
Right, and it's cost and capacity intensive and holds some sort of strategic importance to the business.
Think about the difference between running a standard global supply chain and executing a hostile corporate takeover.
Oh, wow. Yeah, okay.
Right. The supply chain is ongoing, continuous maintenance. The takeover is a unique, high-risk event with a strict deadline. It requires completely different management tools.
That's a great analogy.
And because of that strategic uniqueness, SAP PS actually categorizes these ventures into two main financial buckets from the very start. You have externally financed and internally financed.
Okay, wait, let me push back on that distinction for a second.
Sure.
If the system is essentially just tracking resources and timelines, why does the software care whose money is paying for it? I mean, a dollar is a dollar, right? A concrete pour takes the same amount of time regardless of who signed the check.
Well, the system cares because of how revenue is recognized and how costs are capitalized on the back end.
Oh, the accounting side of things.
Exactly. So externally financed projects are customer projects. An outside client is footing the bill, meaning the ultimate goal of the project is to generate direct billing and profit upon completion.
Got it.
The system has to track all those costs against the incoming revenue from the client contract just to ensure profitability.
So the internal projects are tracked differently because there's no, external client paying an invoice at the end.
Precisely. And internal projects are broken down even further into overhead cost projects and capital investment projects. And these trigger entirely different accounting mechanics.
What's the difference there?
Well, an overhead cost project might be a massive internal IT infrastructure upgrade, right? The company is spending its own cash, and the system needs to amortize those costs across the various departments that actually benefit from the new IT system.
Ah, okay. And a capital investment one.
A capital investment project is like building a new factory. That creates a fixed asset. The system has to track literally every nail and steel beam so that when the factory is finished, the total cost can be capitalized on the company's balance sheet.
That is intensely detailed. So regardless of the financing, SAP PS is monitoring the technical build and the commercial, financial reality at the exact same time.
Yep, exactly at the same time.
It keeps the budget and the blueprint in the exact same room, talking to each other constantly.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So to pull that off, the documentation outlines that SAP splits the project into two distinct points of view. First, you have the structural point of view, which basically defines the what. And then you have the process point of view, which defines the how and the when. So I figure if we want to understand how a project actually gets built in this system, we need to look at the structural side first.
Yeah, definitely.
And this is known as the work breakdown structure, or the WBS.
The WBS, yeah, this is the foundational model of all the work to be performed. It's essentially a hierarchical map.
Like a family tree almost.
Exactly like a family tree. You start with the overarching goal at the top of the tree, and you branch down into smaller assignable components. The source actually uses the example of building a hot rotation research helicopter.
Which is such a perfect testing ground for this software. I mean, you don't accidentally build a research helicopter.
No, you definitely don't.
So at the very top of our structural tree, we have the ultimate goal, the helicopter itself. But you can't just build a helicopter to an engineering team and walk away.
Right, that would be chaos.
So it branches down a level into major categories like machinery, planning, and engineering.
And then those branches split further. The engineering and production branches split into physical components. You get separate branches for the rotor head, the rotor blades, the cockpit.
Okay, yeah.
And the production branch splits into mechanisms, electronics, hydraulics. And you just keep subdividing until you reach the absolute bottom of the tree. This creates what the system calls WBS elements.
Okay, so from a data architecture standpoint, I'd assume a WBS element isn't just like a text box on a flowchart. If SAP is tracking the financials simultaneously, these elements must have some sort of active role in the accounting.
Oh, absolutely. They're essentially financial catch nets.
Financial catch nets. I like that.
Yeah. Each WBS element represents an activity or a work package, but more importantly, it forms the basis for cost planning and coordination.
How so?
Well, when you attach a budget to the cockpit electronics WBS element, any purchasing or labor charge to that specific element is instantly tracked against its specific budget. And project managers can even alter how this massive tree is structured based on their strategic needs. The source notes 3 distinct orientations: by phase, by function, or by object.
Wait, why would a project manager choose one over the other? Like, if we're building a helicopter, wouldn't we always just break it down by the physical objects? The cockpit, the tail, the rotors?
Usually, yes. Object-oriented is incredibly common for physical manufacturing because it aligns perfectly with procurement. If you structure by object, the purchasing department knows exactly which WBS element to charge the rotor blade materials to.
Right.
But consider a massive enterprise software rollout. There are no physical objects.
Oh, I see.
In that case, you would organize the WBS by phase: the design phase, the beta testing phase, the global deployment phase.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And the function one?
If you want to track costs across specific skill sets, you organize it by function. The engineering branch, the quality assurance branch, the legal compliance branch. It just gives the project manager the flexibility to align the financial tracking with how the business actually operates.
Yeah, but a hierarchical map of components or phases, it still doesn't solve the glass delay problem we talked about earlier.
Right. No, it doesn't.
I mean, the WBS just tells you what pieces exist and where the bucket sits. It doesn't tell a project manager how those pieces cascade through time. You can't install the helicopter's electronics into the cockpit before the cockpit has actually been fabricated.
Exactly. Which brings us to the second point of view in SAP PS, the process point of view.
Okay, the process.
If the WBS is the skeleton outlining the parts, the processes are the central nervous system that dictates how they move through time. SAP tackles this using what the source calls activity on node networks.
Activity on node networks.
Yeah. Networks introduce the dimensions of time, sequence, and dependency.
Okay, so this is where the domino effect is managed.
Yes, exactly.
The documentation says these networks are the basis for planning, analyzing, and monitoring the schedule. They answer the critical business questions like, where are the scheduling uncertainties? When exactly do we incur costs? When must specific resources be available?
And that resource timing is critical. Like if you need a highly specialized, incredibly expensive crane for the factory build, you do not want to pay a monthly rental fee if you only need it for 3 specific days during week 4.
Oh, yeah. That would destroy the budget.
Right. The network prevents that by using 2 core components: activities and relationships.
Okay, let's break down how an activity actually functions in the system. The source lists 4 specific types of activities: internally processed, externally processed, general costs, and material components.
Yep.
But how does the software treat, say, an internal activity differently than an external one?
It really comes down to what back-end systems are triggered. An internally processed activity is work done by your own company's employees or machines.
Okay.
When you schedule an internal activity in the network, SAP communicates with the HR and capacity planning modules to reserve those specific employee hours. It actually checks to see if your internal engineering team has the bandwidth.
Wow, so it's doing real-time capacity checks.
Exactly. An externally processed activity, however, means you're hiring an outside vendor. When that activity hits the timeline, it automatically triggers protocols in the procurement module
To do what?
to generate purchase requisitions and contracts for the external contractor.
Okay, so the system is really doing the heavy lifting behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
And I'm guessing general cost activities would track overarching expenses that don't tie to a specific physical task, like travel expenses for the project management team.
Spot on. Yeah.
And material components track the physical goods you need to acquire, triggering the inventory management systems to ensure the steel or the glass actually arrives at the loading dock on time.
Right. But you have all these different activities, and they are isolated events until you link them together. That is the function of the second component of the network, which is relationships.
Relationships.
Yes. The relationships define the technical dependencies. They dictate the predecessors and successors, basically creating a dynamic web.
Okay, so rather than just listing the types of relationships the source details, let's look at how they would actually play out in our helicopter build, to handle that domino effect.
Great idea.
The most common one mentioned is the finish start relationship. Basically, the finish of one activity dictates the start of the next.
Right. So the physical fabrication of the helicopter cockpit must completely finish before the installation of the electronics can start.
Makes sense.
If the fabrication takes 3 weeks longer than planned, the finish-start relationship automatically pushes the start date of the electronics installation back by 3 weeks. It recalculates the entire schedule downstream.
Man, that's powerful. But they aren't always sequential like that, right?
No, not always.
Because the source also details start relationships, where the start of one activity dictates the start of its successor. I imagine this is used for parallel processing to save time.
Yes, it is essential for aggressive timelines.
Oh.
So when the engineering team starts designing the helicopter's rotor system, the transmission team might need to simultaneously start designing the gearbox. Okay.
They are tethered at the starting line because the transmission design requires constant real-time data from the rotor design.
Ah, okay. Then you have the inverse of the finish relationship. 2 activities have to cross the finish line at the exact same moment.
Exactly. So if we are finishing the helicopter build, the software integration team and the hardware quality assurance team might need to finish their final checks at the exact same time.
Why is that?
So the federal aviation inspectors can immediately begin their certification process on a complete system.
Right, okay. That's very clear.
But the final relationship type is the one that often trips people up. It's the start-finish relationship.
Yeah.
This dictates that the start of one activity directly determines the finish of its successor.
I have to admit, that feels completely backward to me.
It really does.
Why would the start of task A force the finish of task B? Wouldn't that create some fragile house of cards where a premature start triggers a false completion?
I mean, it seems counterintuitive until you look at transition periods, particularly in IT or infrastructure. Okay, give me an example.
Imagine a company rolling out a new, highly secure enterprise computer network. They cannot simply turn off the old legacy network until the new one is fully live, verified, and operational.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, the moment they officially start operations on the new network, that specific action instantly dictates the retirement of the old network. The legacy system's shutdown is completely dependent on the successful start of the new one.
That makes perfect sense. It's a handoff dependency. So by mapping out thousands of these relationships across all the internal and external activities, SAP basically builds a massive dynamic web.
It's a huge web, yeah.
So when the cockpit glass is delayed, the system traces the finish-start relationship to the electronics team, sees that the internal engineers are now double-booked, flags the capacity conflict, and recalculates the final delivery date all in real time.
Yep. It provides total visibility. But this brings us to the execution phase. The project manager has built the WBS map. They've built the network timeline. Now they have to actually assign the work to the engineers on the floor.
Right, and this is where we hit the concept of the work package.
The work package.
Yeah, so if I'm the engineer hired to build the helicopter's rotor head, I receive a work package. Now, given the immense complexity of SAP's data tracking, I would assume work package is this highly encrypted, standalone digital object. like a massive file living in its own special project database that requires specific authorizations to access and update.
See, that assumption leads to the biggest revelation in the source text.
Really?
The work package is not a separate function or data object in the project system. It is essentially an illusion.
Wait, an illusion. If it's not a data object, what exactly is the engineer looking at?
It's just a conceptual container. You create it according to your needs by grouping a WBS element and its associated activities.
So it's basically just a view.
Exactly. It simply aggregates the start and finish dates, the descriptive text of the work to be performed, and the cost centers responsible. And the reason it isn't a standalone data object reveals the most surprising truth about SAP Project System as a whole.
Which is what the documentation explicitly states, right? It says, and I quote, "The project system has no organizational structures of its own."
Isn't that wild?
It is. The system designed to manage multi-million-dollar factory builds does not actually have its own independent organizational structure.
It completely rejects the idea of creating an isolated silo for project management.
But why?
Because if SAP PS built its own separate databases for project purchasing or project inventory, you would constantly have to reconcile that data against the company's main financial systems.
Oh, that makes sense.
There would always be a lag. And in high-risk projects, data lag destroys budgets.
So where does the data actually live? How does a project manager have any authority in the system if they don't have their own structural ecosystem?
The system acts as a highly intelligent overlay. It incorporates the project into the existing enterprise structure by making assignments directly to the organizational units that already exist in accounting and logistics.
So it piggybacks on the rest of the company.
Completely.
Instead of creating a separate project purchasing department, it plugs directly into the company's existing purchasing organization codes. Instead of creating a project factory, it routes the material requirements directly into the company's existing plant codes.
You've got it.
It talks directly to the company codes and profit centers that the corporate finance team uses every single day.
And because of this overlay architecture, SAP PS has constant real-time access to data across every single department involved.
So when the existing procurement department issues the purchase order for the helicopter class,
the project system knows instantly.
wow.
The project budget is updated the millisecond the purchase order is approved, without anyone having to manually enter data into a separate project spreadsheet.
It's like the project system is the central nervous system, kind of lacing itself through the existing muscles and bones of the business. It uses the arms and legs the company already has, rather than trying to grow new ones just for this specific task.
That is exactly what it's doing. It means you plan, execute, and account for projects as part of your normal commercial procedures.
Yeah.
The project becomes fully integrated into the daily heartbeat of the business, utilizing the exact same logistical pathways and financial checks and balances as standard operations.
Man, we have dissected a massive amount of architecture today. We started by looking at how projects are uniquely high-risk, strategically vital ventures with strict timelines and intense capacity requirements. The system doesn't manage them like routine daily tasks.
No, it doesn't. And we saw how SAP tackles this complexity from two distinct angles.
Right.
The structural WBS acts as the hierarchical map, breaking massive goals down into actionable budget-tracked elements. Then the process-oriented networks introduce time, using a dynamic web of internal and external activities.
Linked by those strict technical relationships, right? To track the domino effect of delays and resource demands.
Exactly.
And we ultimately uncovered that the project system doesn't isolate this data in a silo. It overlays the entire project onto the company's existing accounting and logistical structures, ensuring real-time financial tracking without creating redundant organizational units.
It forces transparency. The project cannot hide its financial realities from the rest of the enterprise because it is living in the exact same ledgers.
As we wrap up this deep dive, there is one final implication of this overlay model I really want you to consider.
Yeah, this is important.
We often assume that the hardest part of managing a massive, complex project is mastering the software itself, right? Like learning how to build the WBS and map out the start-finish relationships in the network.
Sure, the software is complex, but the architecture of SAP PS reveals a deeper truth about project management.
Exactly.
Because the system maps directly over existing departments, and because it relies on the existing purchasing, HR, and manufacturing units to execute the work, a project is never an independent entity.
Which means a project manager's real challenge isn't just balancing the WBS budget or optimizing the network timeline. The real challenge is mastering company politics.
You are constantly borrowing resources, employee hours, and machine capacity from departments that have their own standard daily quotas to meet.
Right, the software perfectly calculates that you need the internal engineering team for 3 weeks, but the project manager still has to convince the head of engineering to prioritize the unique project over their routine daily operations.
It's all about negotiation.
True control doesn't come from a perfectly isolated software environment. It comes from successfully navigating the messy, interconnected reality of the business itself. So the next time you are analyzing a timeline for a massive new initiative, you'll know exactly how the underlying architecture is holding it all together and why a single delayed shipment of glass ripples through the entire company. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.